Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change by Amanda K. Gross. I'm reading this book through a little bit at a time to help my own process of deconstructing the delusion of white supremacy, and if you would like to join me, you can get copies attached here. Leaving the Master's House. Whiteness, in many ways, is a form of amnesia. The spiritual and emotional void it has left us with is a result of a profound communal disruption, one that facilitated white people's identification with their oppressors, and one that was likewise built on generations of European matricide. There's a powerful short story written by Langston Hughes in his collection, The Ways of White Folks, called Cora Unashamed, which we sometimes read in white women's groups. The story is told from the voice of Cora Jenkins, who, much like Ms. Sylvia decades before, has been hired to care for the household and children of a white family. To briefly summarize what is much better experienced through Hughes' own words, when the white family's daughter is found out to be pregnant, her parents force her to have an abortion that ultimately results in her emotional and then literal death. When I first read this story, I felt it in my bones. The violence of the white family to its children, and girl children in particular, that they would rather kill off their own daughter and grandchild than bear any rupture to their performance of white, upper-middle-class patriarchy. The way Ms. Cora narrates her experience of having extended herself and her heart to raising someone else's child, only to have them destroy that child, and the funeral scene where Mrs. Cora accuses the family in front of their white guests, and then in finality removes herself from the whole situation in the acceptance that there is no saving white people and no place for her in that impossible, irredeemable task. Even now in rereading it, I feel the story's heavy truths in between my ribs. My connective tissue begins to ache. These feelings of grief have me recalling Audre Lorde's words, "For the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house." They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. However, the last part of this social justice diatribe usually gets left out. And this fact is only threatening to those women who still define the master's house as their only source of support. What sense of community and belonging is left for those of us who still define the master's house as our only, and I would add, primary source of support? What ways of knowing and being have we forfeited in order to manage the plantation household and raise its inheritors? What psychic damage of slavery, as Painter describes, have we inflicted upon ourselves, our white families, and ultimately on our whole society? Going further, Painter contrasts this description of psychic damage by naming two crucial means of support that helped enslaved people in resisting permanent damage from the daily abuses of enslavement. Firstly, this support emerged through the development and practice of spiritual, religious, and ideological beliefs. A slave religion that not only opposed the master's religious and social ideology of white supremacy and black inferiority, but also created a counter system of beliefs that proclaimed equity would ultimately prevail in God's world. Secondly, this support manifested through the intentional cultivation of community made up of actual or fictive kin. Enslaved women were the main actors in weaving and maintaining their chosen family networks, as Painter refers to Deborah White's work. Enslaved women forged their own independent definition of womanhood through their own web of women's relationships, which functioned as an antidote to slavery's degradation. Black women carried and continue to carry the disproportionate amount of communal, relational, emotional, and spiritual labor in the cultivation of alternative family, co-creating belief systems that repudiated what was proselytized in the master's house. This historical revelation tells me something about why I have gravitated toward chosen family with Black women and why that invitation exists, why it has even had to exist at all. The codependency that whiteness enables has resulted in a messy enmeshment. Black women's labor sustained their community's resistance while they were simultaneously being forced to sustain their white charges. The plantation's white children were dependent on their black caretakers, who also provided perhaps their only entree to support beyond the master's house. The high majority of white children grew up to replicate the violence of the master's house, despite their earliest and most constant attachment figures. And white women, in particular, were rebranded and refashioned ourselves as dependent on that which brought us harm. These make up some of the sticky threads I am working to untie. I am especially struck by Painter's interpretation of what all this meant for white women who lacked collectively held alternative ideologies, such as slave religion, and whose positionality granted them immense power in certain spheres, such as with enslaved people in their homes, while stripping them of access in most other ones. Painter notes, of all the people living in slaveholding societies who might have benefited from an alternative system of values, rich white women were the least likely to forge one. In the words of Catherine Clinton, plantation mistress, unlike plantation slaves, had no comparable, in the words of Catherine Clinton, plantation mistresses, unlike plantation slaves, had no comparable sense of community. For those of us who have had no comparable sense of community, it's no surprise that we gravitate to those who have centuries of experience forging self-determined identities and networks of kin. There are reasons why our movements need leadership from those who have been the most impacted. It makes sense that I would seek out mentorship from someone I admired, that I would look for guidance from someone with emotional intelligence and courageous truth-telling, and a spiritual practice to back it all up. And as someone still licking the wounds of my home culture, it is no surprise that I began to idealize another, that I found a special pedestal for Felicia and her life's work. Given the rejection of the wicked webs, given the lack of safety I felt in my home community, whether real or perceived, given plantation mistresses having no comparable sense of community, it's no wonder I attached so completely. Given the mother wound, it's no wonder I repressed my truth so diligently. Is it safe to express anger at the one who is keeping you alive? Self-abandonment is, after all, at Mistress Syndrome's core. Self-abandonment is, after all, one of the master's most effective tools. Self-abandonment brought my concept of chosen family to its knees. Since the era of glitzy beach vacations and ice cream parlors, I have learned more information that has both poked holes in my understanding of chosen family and also reinforced the goodness of that time. I'm learning to hold both the heartbreak and the joy, the hardships and the triumphs of trying to untie the wicked webs and co-create something new. And despite the heartbreak and the rocky endings, chosen family was and has been a lifetime for me. It was because of this lifeline, because of the respite and the work I have risked within chosen family, that I have been gradually more able to reflect upon, move closer toward, and more authentically re-engage with the traumas and healing within my own. Check out White Women Get Ready.